The third season of Netflix's flagship drama, The Crown, returned with a brand new cast, exploring the key events in the royal family's life in the 60s and 70s. I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby. I'm here with co-star Tobias Menzies, who plays Prince Phillip. Tobias, the royal family are very much a part of our consciousness. There's so much to absorb about Prince Phillip as a public persona. So how did you decide to approach getting to know his private or personal side?
There's obviously a lot written about him and a fair amount of sort of interviews and footage of him. So there's plenty to look at. But yes, I think the challenge with him is that he doesn't really express his personal side a huge amount. He's quite an armoured person, so will rarely be drawn into kind of emotional statements or discussions of his personal life in any way. So yeah, the job of the show and what Peter writes is imagining our way into how are they behind closed doors? What is this marriage like? What are they like as parents? This strange juxtaposition of a very, a family, which is a pretty universal kind of thing, inside this very unique situation of this royal family, this structure, this institution that we have in England. So, yeah, I mean, I started with a bunch of reading, watching and listening to him as much as I could, and then obviously it's a version of this story, which is Peter's writing, his provocation, his kind of proposal of who these people are. It's harder to tell what they're actually, what they're actually like at breakfast, but that's the fun bit, trying to imagine that, trying to get an audience close to what that might be like.
Yeah. Is it particularly challenging to strike the right balance between authentically portraying a real person and falling into like the trap of perhaps mimicking him?
I certainly thought so. Yeah. I felt instinctively that if it was too much a work of, as you say, mimicry, that would be probably quite irritating to watch maybe for 10 hours. So it was about getting a balance of getting close to them so that you feel like you are having breakfast with Philip and the Queen, which is definitely a kind of magic element of the show. But really, once you've got that and you've got the audience's confidence, in a way, just let them go through that into the story. And so, yeah, that was a sort of tonal balance to strike.
Yeah.
But you can't, you definitely, when I was watching seasons 1 and 2, the moments when the actors get really close to them and they really sound like them and move like them, that's also really thrilling. So I was also keen to fulfill that.
Yeah.
And just don't be irritating, I guess.
Don't be irritating. That's the key.
Always a good note. Yeah.
Because when I watch you and Olivia and the other cast, I imagine immediately this has got to be difficult. These are real people. We know them. We think we know them very well. They're all over our TVs. And then not only that, you had the challenge of taking over the role from another actor. And that doesn't happen every day. And when we spoke to Matt Smith last year, he said he was super excited to be handing over the baton to you. He thought it was great casting and he was really excited. But what's it like to take it over from him and then make him your own?
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I did a play when Matt was starting out. We did one of the casts of the History Boys at the National Theatre, and he was one of the boys and I was the teacher. So we've worked together, and I've seen him over the years, and he's a fantastic guy. And I mean, at some level, it was also easy. I really admired what he did in the show. I really liked the show anyway. And in some strange way, it's kind of an amazing resource to have these 20 hours of beautifully made television created as your backstory which you can go back to. And I certainly went back and watched what he had done, both physically, vocally, and also just to sort of get myself into the version of Philip that we're constructing and telling. But yes, I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say there were trepidations at times. Obviously, it was a very successful 2 seasons. They won a lot of awards. So there's a bit of you that doesn't want to drop the ball on that front, and people really not enjoy what we've made for the third season. But it seems like, and I think a lot of credit has to go to the team, the creative team, which has obviously been consistent in the very bold act of recasting everyone. That could have definitely backfired, but I think they've chosen the right people, but they've also kept enough. And I guess Peter's writing is a big part of this. Also, the kind of, you've spoken to Adriano. The look of it, all those elements were contiguous with what had happened before, and so thankfully it feels like we've got a right balance between old and new, which again allows the audience just to continue this story with us.
Yeah, you're right. This could have been a complete nightmare. It could have really backfired, but it doesn't. There is enough continuity, and the cast really does kind of a leap to the moment. And it also makes me realise, like Josh was saying this about playing Prince Charles. I think you'd be in the same boat, that they get short shrift in the media often. For some reason, people don't like them, or they have a certain perception of them. And I'm wondering if after you've gone through a season, you've done season 4 as well, has that changed your perceptions fundamentally of this man?
Yeah, I get asked this question quite a bit. I mean, I would have to admit that sort of fundamentally, politically, I'm more on the sort of Republican end. That's small R Republican in the sort of
same,
sense rather than the American sense. But I think what is really great about the show is that it takes that institution and I don't think with too much bias. I mean, it's obviously, I don't think it looks to trip them up, but it does take a serious consideration of the institution and of these people. And I'm okay with that. I think they are worthy of that. And I think it's, so I think I hadn't really, if I'm honest, considered him or the family a huge amount before I came to work on it. And I think that's quite common in England. They are just there. They're part of the furniture that is Britain. Now, of course, some people take a great deal of interest. But I think I have, even if I might not agree with them on a sort of political level, I suspect if I was pushed, I do have I've come to have a great regard for their sense of duty. They work hard. They take the role seriously. It's not a job that I would enjoy doing at all. No. It's very ceremonial. You turn up and you kind of have to make small talk and open things. And I imagine, for someone like Philip, clearly an intelligent person, intellectually curious, an alpha male, a man of action, was in the Navy, served in the war. That can't be an easy thing to do. So just as a character study and as how has that person made sense of their life and what they've done with it is fascinating. And it's, so for that reason, I think I have come to have a great deal of regard for them. Yes, they're hugely privileged, but there are undoubtedly challenges to their lives.
Yeah, that is the beauty of the show. I think we all come to that conclusion if you're a fan of the show. And that brings me to this. I mean, you've really touched on this now, but let's go into a bit deeper, because episode 7, Moondust, for me was such a highlight. It's such a beautifully nuanced episode demonstrating this monumental historical event and how it triggers this discontent in how he saw himself and his own accomplishments. No one would have ever thought that about him. It's a beautiful construct that Peter Morgan's put together. What were your thoughts when you first read the script? Were you excited to kind of tackle that? Yeah.
It straight away felt like a fascinating juxtaposition to take the moon landings and an exploration of Philip more into his sort of character. And those are not two things that you would naturally put together, really. It's obviously a work of imagination. I don't know specifically what Philip felt about the moon landings, or whether he did become sort of very sort of obsessed with it. But I think it's Peter at his best. the kind of combination of the epic and the personal. And also alongside the moon landings, he also is weaving about Philip, that he had set up St. George's House, that he has had quite a significant part of his life has been faith, and looking to draw together different faiths as an engine to sort of social change and to sort of finding solutions to problems in the world. So the episode is also digging into that and that relationship with Dean Woods.
Yeah, in fact, the moon landing is obviously the key part of the episode. But for me, it resonated more that his existential angst and dissatisfaction, and his inability to find calm and fulfillment. They're the words that Peter Morgan wrote, and begging for help from these guys that he initially mocked and brushed off as nonsense. That's stunning writing from Peter Morgan. Like, it really, I wasn't expecting that, and your performance in that particular moment was pretty reserved, but there was a lot going on under the surface. So talk us through that particular scene, because it was probably the highlight of the whole episode.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges of Philip is that he is reserved emotionally. So he's not expressive, and yet actually he does strike me as someone that does have a lot of emotion in him. Now, it comes out in kind of frustration or sometimes these off-color remarks and jokes, but there's a sort of fixing energy that does come off him. But he also does feel like he's someone who has quite a lot of stuff that's suppressed and kind of armored. So that's at the heart of sort of the performative challenge, is in an episode like that, where you are looking to delve into what is underneath all that kind of armoring. But you have a character who doesn't really want you to see it.
Yeah.
So, and that's a really enjoyable and fruitful, actually, constriction, because, in his relationship with those men of the church, who he has huge resistance to naturally, and is obviously going through a period in his life where he doesn't think that religion has answers, and is ridicules and belittles this new Dean and what he is attempting to do, which is gentler, more compassionate than Philip can really be at that point in his life. And to see that journey through the episode of going from, the answer is rockets and exploration and going to the moon, that's how you realize who you are and that's how you find yourself, to come into a place where he has to go inside himself to realize who he is and where he's at and what help he might need. That feels Greek and deeply existential, and I love it when you have that kind of scale to work with. I would like to mention Tim McMullen, who played Dean Woods.
Yeah.
It was such an important part of that episode, that relationship and how it changed, and his kind of deep compassion and patience, but it wasn't kind of particularly beautifully pitched, and great sort of foil to this kind of the roiling inarticulacy, really, of Philip, who just can't, it's overwhelming him and he can't find the words until he kind of has to. That's to hear a character like Philip speak at that length and with that kind of, in that very candid and at times emotional way. I think that's when the show really kind of wins, is it's, despite all the stuff that you think you know about him, you're sat watching him kind of really reveal himself.
Yeah.
which is kind of beautiful. And also, you don't have any kind of film footage to show you how Philip does that stuff, you know, how he is when he might say something very self-revealing. And so, yeah, that's where both Peter's imagination, my imagination, and Jess Hobbs, who was directing that episode and was also a big part of realizing that stuff. Our imaginations have to come together and sort of go, how would he say this stuff? How would he?
Yeah.
How would this scene go?
And then what I love as well is there's that moment where he acknowledges his mother who has passed, and it brings us back to episode 4 with immediately the scene where he has a newspaper and Princess Alice is on the ground praying. It's one of the highlights of the episode, and it's beautiful that it links those two up. So well done. I thought it was really good.
It's really great to hear. Thank you. It sounds like you read it on many levels.
I did. Yeah. It meant a lot to me. And I don't even really care about the royal family, but I love the show. I've got two.
I think it's also very interesting about masculinity, isn't it? I think that episode about also midlife, you know, arriving at a place where you find yourself thinking about the decisions you've made in your life and where you've ended up and how comfortable or not you are with those decisions. And, you know, and that can be uncomfortable. And, you know, I think the other really interesting part of that episode is when he's speaking to the astronauts and is, you know, says about, you know, the decisions I've made and the person I married. And that was a line actually that I really was sort of really wondered about, struggled about, wondered whether that was a thing that he would really be able to say. It feels so close to the bone that he would even touch on that fundamental, life-changing decision to marry this woman who then became queen, and in a way his life has never been the same since. And so I remember having quite a few conversations both with Peter and with Jess about what was in there and how to earn that. And I think anyone of any guy anywhere near their midlife, I think, is going to relate to, you know, those thoughts, those questions.
Of course, absolutely. Anyone who's in their midlife or who has a father, there's a lot of paternal stuff going on there. You know, and that's you know, a whole other conversation. But it resonates tremendously. It's very intimate that he would say that to those guys that he looked up to and then realised, hang on a sec, all they care about is a water cooler. So there's a lot going on in that episode. We could literally spend hours. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I will not let you go until I ask you about Outlander. Otherwise, I will, I will, you know, be in big trouble. So in 30 seconds, people are still talking about the finale of season 1. Because you played Frank. Frank's, you know, a lot of us love Frank, but you also played the most monstrous character, Blackjack. And when Blackjack tortures and rapes Jamie, it was very confronting, and it's not something that we see on TV very often. And I'm wondering, at the time, did that resonate with you personally? That it was a really difficult thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was tricky to shoot. I mean, you know, we've been working for over a year together, Sam and I, and it's a hard thing to realise. But I also really believed in the necessity for that story, which has huge sweetness and romanticism and love and beauty in it, that it also needed an equally kind of opposite underbelly, which really was provided by the character of Blackjack, who, let's not beat around the bush, is a study in sadism. And I was, in a way, I was surprised that both the showrunners and stars let us make it as dark as they did. But I am proud of having the courage to make it that kind of. Because the thing I think that partly makes it uncomfortable is it isn't just about torture and rape. those are just the instruments that this person is using
Yeah.
to unpick another person. So I think the thing that actually gets to people is the sort of psychological element of it, that it's considered and so kind of tailored, or that he's kind of understanding this man and then using that against him to unravel him. And that's the really unsettling aspect of it.
Very. It was a pretty amazing moment in the show. Anyway, unfortunately, we're running out of time. Next conversation, we'll do plenty more. And congratulations on your SAG ensemble win, by the way. I know you weren't there, but it was a pretty exciting thing for the whole cast to win earlier this year. So
yes, I know. I'm sorry that I wasn't there. It was, but yes, really, it's such a great thing for this new cast to receive. You know, we
absolutely.
were very, very excited.
Well, thank you for your time today, Tobias. Good luck, and we look
forward
to
chat to you. Take care.
Everyone go to Gold Derby, make your predictions, click subscribe. Don't forget to watch all of our great contender chats just like this one.